Now we are going to see author introduction Dylan Thomas. One of the best known poets of the 20th century, Dylan Thomas was born in 1914 in Swansea, a small industrial city in the southern coast of the Wales. One of the countries of the Great Britain. The Thomas father, a school teacher, gave him the name of the Dylan after the name of the she god in the Celtic mythology. The little knowing that the poet is eventually fame would help make this name is such a popular one day. The Thomas father also gave the poet an early awareness of the native and Welsh tradition, as well as the classical of the English literature. As a boy, the Thomas was the athletic and impressionable, and he spent much of the time in outdoors. He loved visiting the beautiful seaside the near Swansea and staying during the summer vacation at the relatives' farm. And seeing that inspired one of the Thomas most of the form of the Fen Hill. The imagery of the Welsh countryside and ghost reappears throughout the Thomas poetry. The Thomas was the precocious poet. His earliest recorded form and humorous piece entitled "The Song of the Mischievous Dog" was composed when Thomas was just 11 years old. As a teenager, the Thomas kept on writing, and once claimed that he had the innumerable exercise book full of forms. Leaving the high school at 16, the Thomas went to work as a reporter of the local newspaper, the South Wales Evening Post. The unhappy with his occupation, the Thomas moved to London, where he was finally discovered as a poet when he was winning a poetry contest. But the Thomas early form in his the notebooks were not empty exercise. The latter years, the Thomas kept returning to this form, the collecting and reworking many of them for inclusion in later publication. The Thomas' first book of the form was published in 1934. When Thomas was 20 years old, the Thomas went to publish three more books of poetry, as well as the final collection of his form near the end of his life. It turned out the Thomas was gifted the other kinds of writing too. He wrote short stories, some of which are collected the portrait of the artist as a young dog, a radio play, under Milkwood, and various scripture, lecture, and talks. Among these prose writing, Thomas' story, A Child Christmas, involves the beloved childhood remembrance of the holiday season. After beginning his literary career in London, 1938, Thomas moved back to Wales, where he spent the most of the remainder of his life. Herr Thomas, who had married Caitlin McNamara in 1937, had 3 children. His home was now a small seaside village of Lorraine, pronounced Lor, and the River Towry. The Thomas Combe Hall, the boathouse, was located at the right of the estuary of the Toby. And if you visit Wales, you can see the same house, preserved as it was, including the small potting and shed Thomas used to writing his forms. There you can look out the same window with beautiful views of the water and the seabirds. And the Dylan Thomas became more and more popular. He was invited to home and the United States gives the reading and talks. Those who attended these recitations recall the intense voice of that of the Dylan Thomas used for the reading his own form as well as reading forms by others. Some of these readings were recorded. If you listen them, you will hear the songs like quality of the Thomas voice, which is some called the voice of the wild Welsh bird. And Dylan Thomas died in New York in 1953. He was only 39 years old. His body was returned to the Lorraine to be buried. And Dylan Thomas wrote one of his more famous poems, "Do not go gentle into that good night." Thank you.